Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military of a Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about India, because probably the most important meeting of the end of 2025 took place exactly in this area. We're going to talk about the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and about the 14th Prime Minister of India, Modi. They had a meeting in New Delhi, and this is exactly the moment when the President of the Russian Federation came to India, and this is the moment when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi personally greeted Vladimir Putin upon his arrival in New Delhi. The two leaders then boarded the same car. So before we continue, another important thing that first of all we need to understand that Putin came to India not to talk with Modi about Ukraine and about the special military operation, of course not about the peaceful settlement of the conflict. He came to India to make business with Indians. According to information we have, the total turnover between India and Russia in 2025 has already reached the number of $60 billion, so which means that countries are planning to increase the total turnover. So they answered the same car, and then they traveled to an informal meeting in the same car, and the Russian president and Indian prime minister began their conversation in the car. So another important thing is that the president of the Russian Federation supported India in their terrorist clashes with terrorists and their fight with terrorists. Furthermore, according to information we have, Russia and India are going to sign a lot of military contracts, and India will purchase a lot of Russian weapons. So this is a very important situation, which means that another regional conflict may happen in this area in coming months or maybe years. But also during the meeting in India, the president of the Russian Federation was interviewed with India Today, and he said lots of interesting statements about the special military operation. So let's discuss them in details. The West unleashed a war against Russia with Ukrainian hands, the president noted. He added that Russia has been trying to resolve the situation in Ukraine peacefully for 8 years. Political and economic interests also play a role in Donald Trump's efforts to achieve a settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. The Ukrainian authorities have practically backed themselves into a corner. Russia has been trying to resolve the situation in Ukraine peacefully for 8 years. The first capital of Rus, the ancient Rus, was Novgorod. Only later did statehood transfer to Kiev. The West openly admitted that it never intended to comply with the Minsk agreements that were signed in 2015. Their signing was necessary to allow Ukraine to arm itself. The topic of Russia's participation in the G7, G8 was raised at the meeting with Witkoff in the Kremlin, but there was no invitation for Russia to return. Russia did not annex Crimea, but came to the aid of the peninsula's residents and could not have done otherwise. The president emphasized that Russia will always protect its interests and its people. Russia does not deny Ukraine the right to ensure its own security, but not at the expense of Russia's security. Many American companies want to return to Russia. Trump wants a quick end to the conflict in Ukraine, including for humanitarian reasons. The United States continues to purchase nuclear fuel from Russia, so it's unclear why they believe India cannot buy Russian energy resources. In response to a question about Trump, the president stated that he never evaluates other leaders. Restoring economic relations between Russia and the United States will benefit both sides in many ways. The president stated in an interview with India Today that he is satisfied with the quality of Russian intelligence and will not judge others. And Vladimir Putin stated that the restoring the USSR is ruled out and pointless. He noted in an interview with India Today that he would not look for someone to blame for the collapse of the USSR. The problem was with the system. So this is the situation, and these are statements of the president of the Russian Federation. Today, lots of contracts will be signed with India, and the sources are saying that Russia will sign a contract to sell a Su-57A to India, and furthermore, we got reports that both Russians and Indians are going to create a factory to produce ships and vessels for the Arctic and the northern regions purposes. Now let's return back to Ukraine. We have lots of very interesting updates as well. Today, according to information we have, the head of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Umerov, and Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Gnatov, flew to the United States for a meeting on the peace plan, according to Zelensky. So the Western countries in Ukraine continue discussing the situation and continue searching for ways how to force the Russians to accept the West demands or to make at least some concessions. At the same time, the Russians carry out massive missile and drone attack through Ukraine. This is not the biggest attack, and obviously this is not one of the biggest attacks since the beginning of the special military operation, but the point is, and as we discussed during the previous video, the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine a long time ago with missiles and drones, and obviously the Russians managed to concentrate and to accumulate additional drones and missiles for the next attack. And these attacks that are currently taking place, that took place during the previous night, that took place yesterday, the day before yesterday, are tasked and are aimed just with one purpose: to search for weak points of air defense of Ukraine and to prepare everything before probably maybe even the final and the last major missile drone strike through the territory of Ukraine, with the purpose to destroy as many as possible objects of the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. The Ukrainian defense minister stated that Russians launched 137 air vehicles and that Ukrainians managed to bring down just 80. As for the previous day, as for the 4th of November, the Russians launched 140 drones and Ukrainians managed to bring down 114. So every single day, the Russians launched 100 plus drones and missiles through the territory of Ukraine, and Ukraine suffered huge problems with this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians continue their assault operation on the city of Gulyai-Polye. One thing is clear, that currently there are very heavy clashes in this area, and that the commander of the group of forces took everything he has, took everything from every single direction. He took everything from the Aristopol direction, from the Velika Mikhailovka area. He took everything from the Pokrovska direction. He took everything from Air 85 road, and he brought everything he has to the city of Gulyai-Polye, where the Russians are trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back. At the same time, we received reports that Ukrainians introduced additional reinforcements and reserves on the territory of the city of Gulyai-Polye as well, and currently there are very heavy clashes in this area, but the problem is that the Russians have complete and significant superiority in their firepower, so that is why Ukrainians probably control the city of Gulyai-Polye, or at least its major part, but Ukrainians pay significant price for this. At the same time, the Russians continue advancing in the fields. As you can see, the map has been adjusted along Air 84-85 road in the area of the villages of Dobropolye and Varvarovka. This is the situation by the end of the 4th of April, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 5th of December, 4th of December and 5th of December. So according to information we have, the Russians secured fields, took under control lots of true lines and fortifications. We came to this conclusion based on two videos that were published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see how Ukrainians were bombing positions of Russians through the true lines in this area. In this video we can see how Ukrainians were FPV droning and attacking Russians right exactly on the territory of this dense network of the fortifications. Based on these two videos we came to conclusion that Russians managed to improve their positions and capture these territories. At the same time, pro-Ukrainian sources published a very interesting video from the settlement of Dobropolye. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians raised two flags in the central part of the city of Dobropolye. So this is the first building where the flag was raised. This flag was raised exactly at this point, and the second flag was raised a bit further to the west. So Ukrainians most likely during the previous 24 hours carry out the counter-offensive offensive operation in this area. But we need to understand one thing, that Ukrainians counter-attacked in the area of Dobropolye not with the purpose to, let's say, continue counter-offensive operation to get the border with the Russian Federation and to attack even further in the direction of Rostov-on-Don. This is not the purpose. This is obviously a media purpose. Ukrainians counter-attack to show that the city of Dobropolye is either in the gray zone or under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So based on this video, we adjusted the map, but we believe that in coming days Russians will counter-attack and they will restore back these territories. So as of now, we adjusted the map, but once again we believe that the Russians will counter-attack. But at the same time, this counter-offensive operation confirms that Russians cannot control and cannot hold the settlements along R85 road under complete control, because the villages were not prepared by Ukrainians, and the Russians didn't have enough of time to prepare these villages for long-term defense. Ukrainians at the same time have a lot of strongholds, and they have a very dense network of the fortifications to the west of the river of Gaichul. We're talking about these trenches where Ukrainians can keep forces, and when they need, Ukrainians can cross the river of Gaichul, where the river is very small, and to attack Russian positions. So that is why we believe that almost every single settlement along R85 road, either in the gray zone or let's say it's just in the gray zone, Russians don't have strong positions there. We believe that the main Russia's positions are located a bit further to the east, and for example, if Ukrainians cross the river of Gaichul and answer this or that settlement, the Russians of course allow them to do this, and then Russians send some squads, some group of forces to clear the settlement. So we believe that the village of Dobropolye would be secured by Russians in coming days. And from the third side, this is another proof that Russians took everything they have from this area with just one purpose: to capture the city of Guliai-Polye and to take the settlement under complete control. This is what everybody understands. Now let's move further and let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk and the Pokrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, several sources published a photo from the TO515 road. This is another photo from another angle of the Pokrovsk cemetery that was created probably during the battle for the city. Just in this picture, we can see up to 15 destroyed Ukrainian armored vehicles just in one photo. So there are lots of vehicles destroyed by Russians. Just another, let's say, site, another picture of the special military operation. We have a map change in the most southern part of the city of Mirnograd. The video was published by Ukrainian sources. We will not watch the video due to violence, but here we might see how Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers right exactly at this point with FPV drones. And based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the Russians continue clearing the city of Mirnograd, at least its southern part. The most important thing that I would like to point to attention, it's just my opinion, we see that the Russian offensive operation is getting slower and slower when talking about Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. We believe that Russians managed to encircle the city of Mirnograd, and 2 or 3 or 1,000 soldiers inside of that area, and the Russians decided to stop and not to risk, because they understand that in a week, in 2 or 3 weeks, the Ukrainians would be completely exhausted and they would be forced to surrender, or they will stay there forever. The Russians prefer to bomb and attack this state with aviation without additional attacks that are unnecessary right now. Now let's move further. If you remember, yesterday we discussed that the Russians improved their positions in the area of the villages of Toretsk and Sofievka, and today we adjusted the map by adding additional gray zone in this area. The Russians, according to pro-Russian sources, have almost established complete control of Sofievka, and Russians answered the southern part of Toretsk. So this is a part of the Russian greatest offensive operation in the Dobropolye-Drushkovka directions. Now let's talk about the city of Konstantinovka. We are going to talk about the strangest direction, about the strangest part of the front line. I would like to remind you that several days ago, pro-Russian sources stated that they managed to capture the settlement of Kalinova. This information was published by pro-Russian sources on the 1st of December of 2025, and yet we haven't received anything that can confirm this. And today, several pro-Russian sources made additional changes, and according to these changes, the Russians Ukrainians improved their positions significantly on the territory of the village of Verolubovka. So we believe that in coming days or maybe even hours, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm complete control over the territory. This is a breakthrough, obviously, and this is something that can lead to even bigger problems for Ukrainians, and this can lead even to the collapse of Ukrainian defense in the city of Konstantinovka. This footholds to the north of the city. Now let's move further. As for the Sivers-Liman direction, we have changes in the area of Yarova. Pro-Ukrainian sources published this video. This is a very important video where we can see how Ukrainians were counter-attacking the settlement of Yarova in its southeastern part. This episode, as I understand, took place somewhere at the beginning of December. Here we can see how Ukrainians were clearing exactly this part of the settlement, fighting with the Russian soldiers that took under control several buildings in this area. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that most likely the territory behind these buildings were already captured by Russians. So based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the territory between the settlement of Novoselovka and Yarova is under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's discuss the situation in the city of Kupiansk. If you remember, several days ago, we had reports from pro-Ukrainian sources and neutral mappers, and these reports were published right before the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, fled to France, where he had the meeting with the president of France, Macron, and we had reports. Zelensky stated that the city of Kupiansk had been secured by Ukrainians, at least its western part. But several days ago, nobody believed Zelensky because it was something impossible according to many opinions. And now on the 2nd of December, we got a report that Ukrainians indeed counterattacked, but we decided not to make any changes until further clarifications, because once again we believe that some mappers made changes based on the report of Zelensky that wasn't proved by anything. And today, by the morning of the 5th of December, we received the video. So this is the video most likely of the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation in the Kupiansk direction. Here we can see how Ukrainian soldiers were moving through the western part of the city, and in this very moment we can see the date. According to information we have, this video was published on the 2nd of December of 2025, and here we could see how Ukrainians were securing the western part of the city. So based on this report, we came to the conclusion that indeed Ukrainians counter-attack, and most likely they will continue. We colored the western part of the city of Kupiansk under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine, including villages of Mirova and Sobolevka. Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation. So as we can see, the situation is very difficult, and we see that nobody is going to stop the special military operation or the war between Russia and Ukraine, despite different statements that were made by the Western countries and Western leaders. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that Europe is preparing for an inevitable conflict with Russia. That was stated by Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko. Preparations are being made in Europe for what is considered in the capitals to be an inevitable military clash with Russia. There is a deliberate preparation of the economy, society, and military organization for an inevitable armed conflict with Russia, which is designed as a long-term threat and to which absurd intentions to attack NATO are maniacally attributed. So we'll see what is going to be next. Of course, nobody wants this big war between Russia and the European Union and Europe, but as we can see, nobody is going to finish the war in Ukraine, which means that this war can lead to something bigger. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.